This is the ISG Digital Dish.
Welcome to Digital Dish, a podcast for women's voices and perspectives in the digital world. We interview women in all industries because digital affects them all. As hosts, we want to share our passion and humor about the digital world we're part of, and we each bring a unique perspective and view from women in all parts of business. You're going to hear topics ranging from technical to organizational challenges, anything that speaks to how women are tackling issues to improve their environment.
I'm Jeanne Cuff. I have a deep curiosity on how women approach their careers in digital, and I'd love to hear their perspective on what they do and how they think about the careers, and of course, talking to smart women is fun.
I'm Lois Coatney, and I love hearing these interviews and bringing both a historical view and a future perspective to those interviews. It's so great to have such a variety of women who do so many things in their digital careers.
And I'm Julie Fernandez. I have a human resources perspective, and I really like to think about how these discussions affect people and organizations.
Together, we wanted to make sure smart women and their point of views were being heard.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Digital Dish. For this episode, I had a really interesting, albeit geeky conversation.
Well, that is, you liked it because you like those geeky conversations.
I do love geek. I'm sorry, I'm such a geek. But I had a great conversation with Leslie Scott. She's a CIO, portfolio and value manager of global IT at Stanley Black & Decker. So that was like, woo! She was awesome to talk to. She had a lot to say, and we talked a little bit. So we talked about a bunch of possibilities to discuss, and the one that she ended up loving, and I did too, was the industrialization of IT. And I thought, oh, I don't know who's going to love this but me. So Lois, do you know what that means?
I saw the title and I'm like, gosh, industrialization of IT. The only thing I could imagine is they're really trying to get a very robust way of working. But then I'm thinking, I wonder, because another big concept out there right now is agile. And so I wonder, are they probably grappling with, they're a big company. Stanley Black & Decker's huge.
Yeah.
So many brands, so many different, they do it all, right?
Right.
And so I wonder, is that part of what she's going to talk about?
Well, yeah, partly. And she explains what she means by it. And it really makes sense in the world of the pandemic. But it's really interesting how she takes the approach. And I think it's also interesting for us to think about in the future, like, what does IT mean to us, especially with the pandemic? And it also involves natural resources, capital, workers, tech, consumers, transportation. I mean, industrialization of IT really means a lot of things, and it can encompass a lot of things, but we are literally experiencing all these things right now. So I think it's really puts me in the mindset that we really need to start thinking about how do we organize how IT fits into so many aspects of our life.
IT is definitely changing these days. So this will be an interesting insight of how SPD is doing it.
Right. So she's been a great conversation. And I also hit her up with all the buzzwords, supply chain and, how's business doing? So it's great. And she was really, really great to talk to because she had a great aspect on it. So
good.
Enjoy the listen.
All right.
Okay. Hi, everybody. Today I have Leslie Scott from Stanley Black & Decker with me. Leslie, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. So thanks for inviting me here, Jeanne. I'm thrilled to be here. I'm Leslie Scott, the VP and CIO of Portfolio and Value Management at Stanley Black & Decker, the large manufacturing company that many of you are familiar with.
That is in global IT, by the way. It's not just general portfolios. I wanted to mention we're going to geek out a little bit, people. So just giving a heads up. So, Leslie, I know you and we talked about a bunch of different things for options of what to talk to about. But Leslie, when she said the industrialization of IT, I went, bingo, that excites me. And I'm probably one of like 3 people in the world that's excited about it. But I think it has, it's really, I think what we're talking about, and you could correct me. I went and looked up because I've done a commoditization of IT. I've talked about that. But this is IT industrialization, and they're saying some of the factors, this is Wikipedia, that influence industrialization, and this is just overall industrialization: natural resources, capital, workers, technology, consumers, transportation systems, and a cooperative government. I think we could throw in there pandemic, and what else? I was thinking of something else. Oh, and supply chain. So I think all those things are part of this discussion. But tell me what you mean by the industrialization of IT.
Sure. So it's when we think about Stanley Black and Decker, and we've got these factories around the world that are involved in producing goods and services for our customers around the world, would love to see the IT shop have the same set of standards, right? That we have a predictable way of delivering our products and services to our internal clients, the consumers across the Stanley Black and Decker business. They know what to get, what they're getting, when they're getting it, how much it's going to cost, and they've got reasonable line of sight and confidence on our estimates. When I think about the complexities of our business, it really is important to have that predictability going out to our different lines of business. We've got, so many different brands. When you think about just our tools division alone, with Black and Decker, Stanley, DeWalt, Craftsman, right? All these great legacy tools brands. But there's a lot of complexity and a lot of different business needs that we're trying to solve as an IT function. So having that predictable, resilient, reliable IT service delivery is so important to our business customers.
So when did you start thinking about this concept and thinking about or putting into place some of the challenges for Stanley Black and Decker?
Sure. So it actually, the notion of industrializing IT predated me at Stanley Black and Decker.
Okay.
So Rhonda Gass, who's our global CIO, had brought together multiple different IT functions from across our different business units into a consolidated, centralized IT, and had established this strategic goal of industrial IT. So it preceded me, but when I arrived at Stanley Black and Decker 3 years ago, it just is so important to have that reliability, that visibility to my internal stakeholders of where we've got gaps in our labor profile, for example, and may have challenges in executing on our commitments to our business. So the notion of industrializing IT for a company that is all about being an industrial world leader is just made sense.
So what were the challenges that you had in doing this? I would imagine there's some organizational challenges, cultural challenges, as well as some actual, well, let's talk about it, the elephant in the room, the supply chain.
Right.
Yeah.
When I think about organizing the IT industrialization, it's all around labor for us and making sure that we've got the right people working on the right work efforts at the right time. So we needed to get people to tell us what they were working on and track their time to different projects, services, incidents, that sort of thing. We had to know what people were spending their time on. And that requires a commitment from every IT employee to track their time on a weekly basis. That was not entirely popular.
No, I've tried that in a few places. Yeah, it's a challenge. Yeah, partly because they're like, I'm doing the work. Why are you bothering me?
Exactly. And it was, it's a little bit of a chicken and the egg. If we don't know you're overworked, we can't get you more help. So really selling the benefits to the employees about, hey, if we know you're working too much, we can get more resources surged your way. Really had to enlist the line managers in making sure that we drove that forecasting of individuals' time and then tracking of what actually happened relative to forecast and driving that accuracy into the forecasts.
So how have you utilized AI or some automation tools to help you streamline this process and standardize the IT?
Sure. I wish I could say that we had a bot that chased everybody and just tracked what they do. We've not quite gotten there yet.
Right.
There are other parts of Stanley Black and Decker. Our finance partners are using AI and robotics to automate processes in really meaningful and significant ways. We'd love to quickly follow on their coattails, but we haven't quite gotten there yet.
Mm-hmm.
We have made it easier on people, though, to follow along with what we're asking for. We've got mobile timesheets and mobile timesheet approval and other things that are enabled on folks' phones to make it easy to do business with.
Great. So now walk me through how this all plan impacted you during the pandemic, how that started out. I know we had a little brief discussion about it. I think that's everybody wants to know, how are you dealing with the pandemic? In general, for everybody I talk to.
Yeah, we had a remarkable year, a number of fronts. 2020 for IT was set out one way and finished another, but with a really fantastic outcome. So what I mean by that, we were in the midst of a transition from internally managed projects, staff augmentation of projects, to a managed services model. And we contemplated that at the beginning of 2020, and we knew the transition would be in full swing mid 2020. We set our plan, we had it in place by February 1st of 2020, and then the world changed.
Right.
So hats off to the entire Stanley Black & Decker IT team, as well as our partners, HCL. We went through the transition 100% remote. No one had ever done that before.
Right.
We weren't entirely sure it was going to work, but created 6,000 plus run books, had multiple knowledge sharing sessions with our different constituents, all virtually. And this is all work that would have been done on site and in person in the pre-COVID times.
Yeah.
But we did it all remotely. We also had some constraints on the business side at Stanley Black & Decker, where there was some cost containment efforts early in the pandemic. So we had some challenges there. We were trying to manage scheduling and making sure that we weren't bringing in additional folks to help. We didn't have the luxury of bringing additional resources in. But then fast forward to the successful completion of the transition in July and August of 2020. And that's when we realized our business was going gangbusters. We had a couple of record quarters. Everybody was stuck at home and wanted to put the deck on the backyard or fix up the home office.
Yeah, the home improvement.
Yeah.
That was in my list of questions, but I knew that it would come up. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So we went from a very much of a defensive, oh gosh, what's going to happen, to, okay, we got through the transition remotely, great, fantastic, and emerged into a ton of demand from our stakeholders for projects, for additional services, right? So fantastic success story for the company and the IT division especially. Lots of hard work.
That's great. I'm so excited to hear that for you. My question though is, so do you think moving forward, the productivity that there's two questions on this. One, the productivity from going remote, did that improve to get projects done, or was that pretty much the same?
It's tough to tease out what is the benefit from the managed services versus going remotely. I will say my own management by walking around virtually is, I feel like our folks are certainly happier with the remote model. We've done polling on that. Yeah. Very satisfied with being able to work from home. We've provided a stipend to folks for internet and to defray some of the costs associated with that.
Oh, great. Yeah.
And then when we look at our project throughput year over year, we were up about 20%.
Wow.
So we're getting more done. Yeah.
So really kind of an increase in productivity. Are you planning to stay with this remote model then moving forward when and if this pandemic comes to an end? Who knows? Yeah.
Yeah, I know, right? It's certainly the new normal. The company has taken an overall position there are some folks that have to be on site.
Sure.
And those are folks primarily in our manufacturing plants who are producing product, and they absolutely have to be there in person. There's folks who are kind of in a hybrid model. Those tend to be the sales roles where they're sometimes on site with a customer, sometimes remote. And then the IT department's in the third category, which is 100% remote. That doesn't mean we'll never see each other. We're
that's good.
Looking to start getting together in person in the next several months. Events not overtaking that, but we are hoping for meetings, team building, that sort of thing. And I'm looking forward to getting back to seeing folks.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a good blend between the two things, going all remote, but missing seeing people. It's one thing to be here on a podcast. I see you, or on a Zoom call, but I think it's nice to be in person. Though I have to say, there's some nervousness that goes. I went to a conference, a sourcing conference that ISG sponsored last week for 3 days in Texas. I didn't know what to do. It was all these people. We had outdoor meetings and, it was lovely, but it was, I've been in a box for 18 months.
Right.
So,
right. And you had to put on real shoes and not just slippers, I bet.
Well, actually, yeah. Well, I broke my toe, so I got to wear my sneakers, and now I think I'm going to use that as an excuse moving forward. So Oh, I broke something. Nobody's going to be surprised. Okay, so let's talk about, I would think that your business, a lot of stuff in the news is talking about the supply chain and how that's constantly, and I know this is really not entirely part of what we were talking about, but I really thought, yeah, this is really going to affect you, the supply chain challenges. Can you tell me what you're seeing and how Stanley Black & Decker is handling it and moving forward?
Yeah, sure. So our global supply organization, our global supply management organization has absolutely got this supply chain issue on their radar, and they're actively managing it. There's, numerous challenges that they're facing and managing through on a daily basis, and hats off to them. Tremendous team of professionals. Where we're seeing it in IT is all around the chip shortage and shortage of just equipment and getting that in place. And thinking about, if we're setting up, closing some offices with the goal of setting up, regional centers or other things like that, we are having to adjust our plans accordingly based on the availability of equipment.
Yeah.
We got to figure it out as we all have to come together globally as business leaders to sort this out. It's not just one company or one country.
No, it's affecting everybody. It's true. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was thinking about your industry, and you're relatively unique in that you don't really, it's not the same for you as it is for many other industries. I know there's a big demand, but it's not like medical supplies or anything. But would you say the supply chain affects you just as much? I mean, how would you compare yourself to other industries in terms of getting all the logistics of this challenging times?
I'd like to say, I will say this, I'm proud of our supply management organization's ability to navigate this complex time, and I think we're probably doing better than most.
Well, that's great. Yeah.
Yeah.
So going back to the industrialization of IT and getting these standardizations. So you've had a cultural problem. You dealt with that. So now, where do you think you're going for that piece now, moving forward? Now that we sort of have sorted out through all the pandemic issues, what do you see? Draw out your crystal ball. Tell me what you're seeing for not just you, but certainly for your company and for other organizations.
Sure. So we're continuing as a company to see the consumer's connection with home.
Yeah.
Right. So I mentioned that earlier, where folks are looking to enhance their home in ways that make it more livable or functional for them. And we anticipate that trend continuing for the foreseeable future, which is fantastic. That in IT translates to more projects.
Oh, yeah.
So from my perspective and where I sit, I want to make sure that we continue to drive a couple of things. One is making sure we've got a clear line of sight into what's the highest priority for the IT organization to go execute against. Not always easy with a diverse set of business stakeholders like we have, but to have line of sight on what the highest priority efforts are, even if we don't have one person on the business side saying, these are your top 10, we need to have a sense of what the highest priority efforts are so that we can get the right people working on those projects.
Well, just real quick, you do have a diverse set of stakeholders. You have the retail stores, you have retailers, you have your internal groups, you have your contractors. So how do you manage that?
Sure. So with the different lines of business, we have a business CIO that sits with each of those.
Okay.
So we have a CIO who's accountable for global tools and storage, someone who's accountable for our industrial divisions, right? So there's a senior IT leader who sits at the table of each of those different presidents. And then we create an IT portfolio that leverages the shared services from the centralized IT department. And we need to have a clear set of priorities and principles that we use to manage that portfolio.
Right, right.
And the reason I say that is we don't have unlimited talent. And we've got to manage, and it's always the key groups, year over year that we continue to see, everybody wants them on their projects. The folks who are experts in certain types of SAP, for example, everybody wants that group to work on their projects. And we need to manage that set of resources appropriately. They're constrained, and we need to focus them where we're going to get the highest return for our stakeholders.
Now I'm hitting you up with all the big elephants in the room. What about the Great Resignation? Has it hit you? Has it hurt you?
So it's something that's certainly top of mind as a leader, right?
We just certainly talked about labor. So yeah, certainly. Yeah.
Right. It's definitely top of mind. I think we have a good corporate culture at Stanley Black & Decker and a good culture within IT. We are generally hanging on to our folks, which I think is great.
That's great. Yeah.
A hard effort to fight. We know that that's not a once and done. You've got to continually win your employees' hearts, right? That's an ongoing thing. We are looking externally, when we look at our partners, and we're seeing them see very profound challenges in some of the areas. There's some skill sets that it's just almost impossible to find folks to come and work on your projects. So that's where having that prioritization is really important, and understanding where you've got to really get ahead of the hiring curve. And especially if there's a challenge, within your org that's multiplied externally.
Well, we hear a lot about the Great Resignation, I certainly know in the U.S., but you're a global company. Are you seeing the same trends elsewhere? Because I know you said there's certain areas that are constrained, or is that part of U.S., or is it globally you're seeing those labor challenges?
I'm seeing it more skill set based.
Okay.
Right. And the nice thing about being a remote organization is we do have access to global talent now.
That's true.
So where my team was previously primarily based in Connecticut or Baltimore, which are our two major hubs,
Mm-hmm.
I've got folks now in the Midwest, and
Yeah, because they could work from anywhere.
right.
I love the fact that is this whole Great Resignation. It's like, but you're not understanding that may be everybody now it's a bigger pool to pick from as long as the skill sets are there, and that's always a challenge. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, anything else you wanted to say? Because this has been a great conversation. I'm a little geeky, but I wanted to take it to an organizational section. And I really appreciate you letting me throw a lot of questions, because your business is such that this is a great conversation to have, because all these things in the pandemic are affecting your company, everybody's company. But I really feel like you've got the upside with everybody doing home improvement, and then the downside, supply chain and labor shortage. So,
Yep.
yeah. So I really appreciate you letting me throw questions at you like this, Leslie.
Sure. Thanks so much. It's been great talking to you, Jeanne.
Yeah, it's been great talking to you too. Thank you so much.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
So that was an interesting interview. Well, for me, because I'm a geek. But I also think it's really interesting how she was really talking about some of the things in IT that you have to organize your projects and put them in order. But what you guys took away from it is really what interests me on this. And today, to our outro, we have Lois, of course, and we have our new host for next year is Missy Lawrence Johnston, who is the human side of digital. Well, that's her jam. So
that's my jam.
Yeah.
Well, I was so excited to hear Leslie. I don't know if I told you this, Jeannie, but actually Leslie was my client a number of years ago at a past client of hers, which I won't mention on the air. But anyway, so it was really great to hear her voice.
Well, she's our first client interview too, by the way, on the show.
Oh, that's true. That's true. So she's been a client of ISG multiple times, and glad to see her at Stanley Black & Decker. But so, I found it as I was listening, the interest about this is a huge company, right, that does manufacturing and has all the issues with supply chain, all the issues of a consumer product. And, oh, by the way, their business went up. Like they were trying to figure out how can they meet all these demands as everybody was, adding on to or redoing their house. So I found it interesting of here's this massive company, and how do they respond? How do they respond in this very dynamic environment? And being in IT, we always think, kind of traditional IT is standards. We need to have certain processes in place, and we all need to have clear roles and responsibilities. And I think she spoke to the fact that she needed those standards and a solid line of sight to her portfolio. But then what was kind of buzzing in my ear is, yeah, but what about agile? And when we talk about agile, and I know that Missy spends a lot of time in this space, so I'm curious your thought about when you're agile, you're supposed to be working a lot more with a lot of flexibility and be able to change as things change around you. And it's like, what is it? It's like they're two pieces of that seesaw, right? Like, what are you going to do? And I'm curious what spoke to you, because I didn't really hear her talk about agile, but how does that weave in?
I know. It's almost like now it's like the A word is a bad word, or it's a word where people, it's the other A word where people think they know what you mean by agile, and then in their mind they go down this other track. And I feel like maybe we just try to stay away from it. But when we talk about like capital A agile, enterprise agility, and flexibility to be nimble enough to move at the speed and pace of the business, which is actually at the speed and pace of the customer or the consumer, different than software development lifecycle, right? Lowercase agile. And so I feel like exactly the same way, Lois, what she was trying to hit on was the fact that you have to align the way IT likes to work to the way the business is connecting with the customer. So you're getting IT connected closer to the consumer.
Okay.
We call that shifting to the left, more so than just thinking about how IT likes to work. Plan, build, run, monitor, right? Break fixes. It's a different mindset. And I think that industrialization is getting IT connected to the way organizations are industrialized, right? I'm doing air quotes for those who can't see us.
Okay. And that's amazing because she talked about the portfolio that the business needs. So it seemed like her, when she talked about her line of sight, she needed to, I think she talked about prioritization, right? How do you prioritize? There were so many things being thrown at them, right? How is she going to do that prioritization? So I guess that's where Agile comes in to really, you got standards you sit on, but it allows you to move to what's most important.
Yeah. I think of the history of like agile, over 26 years ago now. A bunch of dudes got together, went to Utah, got on a summit and said, this is our manifesto. And now there's modern agile. Like I encourage everyone to go check out modernagile.org that's distilled all that down to make people awesome. But in that journey, you had this shift of figuring out not just how to get software out every 2 weeks, but how to really be flexible and nimble. And I think that's what she was really hitting on is truly being agile really does mean I understand the customer, I understand the consumer, I understand what they need. And then my development is based on that need. And I think that's the industrialization of IT now is really just getting IT aligned to consumerism.
From an IT perspective,
Yeah.
I think IT people have always found agile to be challenging because they see it as chaos. Like,
Anarchy.
oh, there's all this feedback and all the customers are going to tell us what they think and how do we work in that environment? And I think the pandemic has sort of forced because I mean, literally, what she talked about, all the things that affected us through the pandemic, it's supply chain, it's pandemic, it's everybody locked down, it's remote. I think all that has sort of forced IT, and having leaders like her is really great because then they're saying, okay, we need to organize this, and there has to be that feedback because that's how we have to respond. To your point, see, I think absolutely, yeah.
Well, it really it helped us sit back and think of all the different companies out there who've had to go through this journey. Every company had a journey that they needed to go through, whether they're big or small or, in manufacturing or, a services-based company. Everybody had this amazing path they needed to go through. And what it sounded like from her is as a leadership team, they got together and they said, this is our path. This is how we're going to work. This is how we're going to make sure that we can keep all the engines going. And I thought that was just really amazing to hear and just think how we have all learned from that and we take that forward.
Lois, I'm thinking about my clients that I've had this year alone in the past 6 to 8 months, the banking and financial services industry and insurance. Their experience, I've helped them with productization. They're no longer being compared to other banks or banks that have better apps. They're being compared to an Amazon. And you're like, but I'm a bank. You want me to productize and understand how things, it's different. And healthcare and life sciences, right? In the wake of the pandemic and the focus on just safety and security and health and wellness, those have been the biggest clients. And so from an industry perspective, in addition to manufacturing, that I know for sure are looking at productizing the way IT is connecting with the consumer and their internal customers, the business.
Well, you know what? That sounds like a great next or future episode because
I was just thinking that. How does the pandemic change IT in the way they're functioning? Yeah.
And in the industries, like just think about healthcare. Think about the amazing trajectory healthcare is going to go with the consumer being, it's getting much more diversified, very much focused on that consumer. And IT has a big role in enable that to happen. So I think there's lots of paths we could go down in different industries and figure out where the next phase is going to go.
For sure.
Okay.
So there you go, Jeannie.
Now I got to go find somebody.
Go find someone.
I find smart women all the time, so that's great. It's so easy.
Well, good. Well, thanks. It was great to hear from Leslie, and thanks for doing that. Thanks for having that great conversation.
Yeah. Thanks, you guys. Thanks for your insight. I think that's really helpful. All right. Talk to you guys, and we'll see you next month in December. Thanks for joining us on ISG Digital Dish. If you like our podcast, subscribe and please rate and review us. Thanks.